Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the DLC Drop podcast. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Alex Tarrant. Alex is the COO and co-founder of Stinger. Stinger facilitates licensing of music in gaming and the Metaverse. He's going to share all of his experience working with labels, working with publishers, working with Metaverse platforms, some do's and don'ts, and how you can do it. Let's talk to Alex. Drop in the untold stories of industry leaders, influencers, and insights on future innovation. I'm John Davidson, and this is the DLC Drop Podcast. All right, welcome to another episode of the DLC Drop Podcast. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome my new friend, Alex Tarrant. By the way, am I pronouncing your last name correct?
That's good. That works. Yeah,
First try?
That's me. Nailed it.
Nice. I do know how to pronounce your last name because we recently spoke on a panel at the NAMM show together, which you provided many insightful insights. So it was great to see you in person then, and great to have you on the show now.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me. That was really fun. That was my first NAMM show, and there's a lot of sounds. That is the most sonically intense conference I've ever been to.
Oh my gosh. Did you walk around the convention floor?
I did. There was from instruments to artists to management. It was great. The Dolby Atmos station was very, very cool.
Yeah. So for our audience who are like, what are you guys talking about? The NAMM show is the world's largest music industry convention. And because one of the companies I work with, PRG, Production Resource Group, is so influential as the largest entertainment production company in the world, the directors at NAMM reached out to PRG. They said, we need a new panel that is innovative, that is interesting. How do we make this year different from last year? And they reached out to me and they said, John, esports. And through some conversations, we got to the theme of the mashup of music, gaming, and the Metaverse. And our good friend, Zach Hahn at Super League Gaming, a partner of PRG, graciously made the introduction and said, John, Alex is somebody that you need to know for many, many reasons. And it turns out that is the truth. So
Zach's the man. I started working with Zach at Disney around 2008, I think. A long time. He's been in games as well. Yeah.
Day ones.
He's the man.
I will say about the NAMM show, the craziest thing to me was they literally have every type of booth in this enormous Anaheim Convention Center of all sorts of music. So you're going from the latest speakers and lights from production companies all the way to violins and pianos and guitars. And then you've got all this technology. And for me, I was just like walking around dazed and confused. And I found the booth with the softest carpet. Like once I stepped on it, I was just like, my feet are so happy after all the walking I've done today.
Oh,
so
I bet that felt good. Yeah.
I think if there's one insight people can take away from this podcast, it's if you are activating a booth at a convention, do the super soft carpet, do the extra cush. That'll bring people and it will extend their stay in your space.
It's a hidden feature. I saw a stand that was literally comprised of hundreds and hundreds of drum cymbals, and I saw somebody accidentally back up into it like it was a comedy from the 50s. It was fantastic.
Incredible. Well, before we lose the audience, who is like, what the heck? I usually listen to leaders in sports, entertainment, marketing, business, esports, and what the heck are these guys talking about? This is an expert in the gaming world, specifically music in gaming and the Metaverse. And Alex, I learned so much from you on that panel. And what I love about what you're doing is you are on the cutting edge of what's next. And that is these virtual events that are happening in the Metaverse, that are happening in games. You know, how are bands getting into video games? How are video games bringing together, you know, music from emerging artists? And you're at the center of all this. So why don't you first tell us, what is Stinger?
Of course. Stinger is a middleware software platform and we are a B2B arm of the labels. So we work with Universal, Sony, Warner, Believe, and others to ingest their catalogs. And we try to do deals across whole catalogs and make it for use in gaming and across the metaverse. And we specifically do this in a way where games and metaverse creators can make money on it as opposed to spend money. I think one of the challenges to date is that music licensing, to be honest, any sort of IP licensing for a video game is a pretty expensive prospect. Right. And expensive in a couple of ways, not only with money, with MGs, but also as a function of time. You have to have specialized legal, you have to have the right folks who know how to do this. And it can take you anywhere from 2 quarters, probably at the fastest, to about a year. And at the end of that effort, you have specifically what you want. But if you want to expand that catalog, you have to continuously go through that effort again and again and again. And as a game maker for many, many, many years, it was frustrating. So what you land up doing is, like any piece of art, or specifically a game where you're creating a universe with its own rules, you have in your head a soundtrack that you want. It's like a filmmaker, right? You have something, you have an idea of what you want in there. And unless you have a really robust team that's specialized who does this, you're probably not going to get it, or rather it can be challenging to get it. So we break down those barriers. Your game, you're a metaverse creator, if you're a metaverse itself and you want to get music in, we can do it and have ways for you to make money on it so that it can not be a cost center.
The DLC Drop podcast is sponsored by Ice Shaker. I've been a huge fan of this brand for the past few years, ever since I met founder Chris Gronkowski. What I love about this product is the brand story, the functionality, and the customization. Ice Shaker is a Shark Tank company invested in by Mark Cuban and Alex Rodriguez, owned by NFL players Rob Gronkowski and Chris Gronkowski. I love using my Ice Shaker anytime I'm driving to the podcast studio, I'm going skateboarding, or I'm at the gym. No matter what I'm doing, it just does a great job of keeping my drinks hot or cold. The customization for Ice Shaker is something that's super unique. You can get any name, just about any logo engraved onto your Ice Shaker and delivered to you within just 3 to 5 business days. Get your own DLC Drop branded Ice Shaker at iceshaker.com/DLC Drop. Save 20% on all Ice Shaker products with the discount code DLC Drop. I have an immediate introduction for you post this
excellent
episode that will be mutually beneficial, which I am writing down now. And the audience, I'm sure, will soon see the fruit of this labor. And we'll go back to this episode and say, that was the moment. This is awesome. So who is your target market at Stinger? If I'm listening to this and whether I'm a metaverse platform, a game, a band, a label, who is the right person who you're looking to connect with?
I mean, the long-term goal is we want to reach as many gamers as possible. Mm-hmm. But our real clients, if you can say Stinger has target clients, is the games, is the actual game makers themselves. Make it easy, take away all the barriers to be able to get music inside of the titles. But long-term, the vision is to just get music in front of people in all the places where they should have music, right? If you're living your social life in a meaningful way in the metaverse, which a lot of people are doing right now, then music is just inherently a part of like the social human experience. So we need to have that incorporated far and wide.
That's a good point. I guess in the past, you would say, like car manufacturers or the the radio stations, right? Is it like what you're saying here is we experience music as we go through our daily lives. And so what has changed is now that we're spending a lot more time in playing video games and in virtual environments than in the past. So that is now the new radio station or what have you. Do I have that right?
That's exactly right. It's the new DSP is your game. The game that you're in is the new radio. It's the new DSP. And because it's a virtual universe that has its own rules, every single game, right? Every single metaverse, you can do neat stuff. You can do stuff in there that you just can't do out here in atoms, things that we're used to. So I think there's just an enormous amount of opportunity.
Yeah, I first became aware of. What is the right term? I don't want to say real music the way we say real sports, right? Like what is the right term to refer to music from a band rather than like arcade music?
Oh, you could say like recorded music.
Okay,
right?
Recorded music. I'll add that to my my little terminology tool belt, if you will. So with recorded music, so a while back, I was associate producer on a documentary of Tony Hawk Pro Skater, and shout out to Ralph D'Amato, who's the executive producer, and I found him on a website, found out he was doing this documentary, and I was like, how can I help? And so we ended up working together. One thing that I didn't realize, I've been a skateboarder for a very long time, so of course I played Tony Hawk growing up. I was very familiar with it. What I didn't realize, that was one of the first video games where they used recorded music rather than arcade music, and the benefit for those artists that these gamers who are playing the game and repeating a level, and you hear that same soundtrack over and over and over, those are now embedded in the memories and the culture of a generation who, millions and millions of people who played this game. So I can see it's such a benefit for these artists to be front and center in these video games.
Oh, absolutely. God, I was a Sega kid, and that was the first console I had that blew my mind. I remember it said like in huge block letters, 16 bits, like the most amazing thing in the world. Blew everybody's eyeballs out of their sockets. And it was the EA Sports Suite and Crazy Taxi. Those two had actual music in them.
Alex, the term is recorded music. It's not
recorded music. Recorded music.
The student has become the teacher.
Oh man, I'm the Padawan now. Yeah. You got me. It was just amazing. Like that Crazy Taxi soundtrack still sticks with me because it was so beautifully of an era, so beautifully nice, and it drove discovery too. I learned about some new stuff in there, some new folks in there, and it was awesome.
So help me understand a little bit about like the dynamics of music and gaming. So we talked a little bit about, this video game you just mentioned. I talked about Tony Hawk Pro Skater. When I think about one of the topics on our panel that we spoke about were virtual events, right? So Marshmello in Fortnite, obviously Travis Scott, Ariana Grande, these very impactful virtual concerts. But can you help our audience understand, we're here today. We're, like you said, gaming is the new DSP for music. How did we get here?
Gosh, that's such a good question. I think over COVID, a lot of people were trapped indoors because it was an apocalypse of sorts. And I think some people were in a creative space in the right place at the right time. I think we saw a wave of mocap-based events, right? And you listed them. I don't even know if nobody who's listening to this isn't aware of some of those big ones that came through. The tricky thing, those were fantastic. Not only were they phenomenal executions, they looked beautiful, they were innovative. I have not a bad thing to say about it. They were beautiful. I think they actually pushed the industry forward. From a game development perspective, I'm a game maker. That's costly. That cost me engineers, could be 9 to 10 engineers, probably for just under a year. If I take a guess, somewhere between a half a year and a year to create the infrastructure to be able to support that single event. Was it incredibly successful in terms of concurrent viewers? Yeah, absolutely. All of them. Actually, I think perhaps there's a degree of diminishing returns now because there's been a lot of them, but audiences want this. That's it. It proved the demand, and it gave a compelling experience. But from a game maker's perspective, spending a year creating a mechanic that only has a single use is really tough. right? Because you spend your time not only from the product management team, but to the developers and then eventually the marketers who are letting your audience know about this. You spend your time making mechanics that can A, be fun for your audience, and B, drive some revenue for a while, for a substantial period of time. And to do all that work for something that evaporates at the end is a tricky prospect. And on top of that, there are probably some pretty substantial artist fees. Mm-hmm. What I think we're going to see more of is low-fi versions of that accomplish similar things. What I loved about those experiences was, and I attended a lot of them, I'm inside of an environment with my friends watching this amazing experience that I literally at that moment cannot get anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I think there's ways to do that without it being super expensive. You know what's a great example, and one that isn't talked about enough, is Niantic in Pokemon Go. They had a very lo-fi version of it. It was billed as a virtual concert. So Post, big Pokemon fan, and I think now he's doing a lot with Wizards of the Coast. Big fan of Magic the Gathering as well.
Yeah.
And they created a concert that was a VOD. It was about, I don't know, I think it was like a 12 or a 14-minute VOD where hosts became animated and went into the Pokemon universe.
Right.
And what they did is they released it at a very specific time. They worked with YouTube to get that launched. I believe it was YouTube on their channels. They whitelisted it. That's an effort you have to go through to get music on a lot of these larger platforms, the social platforms. And from a game perspective, super light lift. All they did is send out push notification, in-app message, and I was following it on App Annie, and I was following it in the charts. Massive game, killing it, still killing it. Pokemon and Niantic are just so amazing.
Yeah.
And they landed up moving from, I think, top 200 downloads, where they had been for a strong period of time, into top 50, and then into top number 1 for the first time in a long time.
So were you able to go in-game like Fortnite and experience it, or were you just watching a video VOD of Post in-game?
You were pushed out to an external platform.
Okay.
You were pushed out to YouTube. And the video was wild. It was this song medley with a Post doing a cover of a Hootie and the Blowfish song at one point. It was pretty wild. But think about that from the effort of the game. It was pretty lo-fi. It accomplished exactly what they wanted to accomplish. It was a limited time event, but the level of effort and the lift they did compared to working with an artist, a management team to get them in a mocap suit and build out an environment. These are two completely different efforts that accomplished very similar goals. So I think seeing games incorporating a lot of live events and live music, but also incorporating exclusives and things that are not super difficult from a technical infrastructure, but still provide a meaningful exclusive experience for their audience. We're going to see a lot more of this.
Well, I think that's a great point, because you can go full Travis Scott, right? But it's like, wait a minute, how much can I pull back from that and still get either the same level of viewership or similar level of viewership, or at least enough to justify my effort, right? Because to your point, it's like, I'm going to work for a year and a half to do all this stuff, and it's amazing, and it's a great case study, and it's on the tip of everyone's tongue and all of the things. But from a business standpoint, that's not something you can necessarily replicate over and over again if you're trying to, I don't know, at least very easily. And one of the answers actually is PRG, who brought us onto that panel. They produced the Fortnite concert series. And so the answer to that was, hey, this was also during COVID, was how can we enable artists who PRG is working with to perform in-game? And so it was like exactly what you're saying. We can't do this Travis Scott, Ariana Grande thing over and over again. So on PRG's XR stage, which for the audience who doesn't know, an XR stage is essentially, think of a green screen, but the floor and the walls and a ceiling, if you have one, are LED instead of just green paint, and there's a coordinated camera system. So you can essentially put somebody in any world you want. And so the Fortnite concert series are live musicians. It's not an avatar. It's video of a live person inside the game. And they were able to work this out with Fortnite, where there's a place you go where that's happening and you can witness it. And so that's an example of lower fi. Now, an XR stage production is still, I don't know if you call that light lifting, but it's lighter lifting than what we saw with Travis Scott.
That's so smart because it requires a single development effort. It was one development effort to create that environment that can show that video. And then it's programming, it's live ops. Everything else, it sounds like what was being done on your side was server side elements that are just fed in there. And if you have all the feeds set up, all you're doing then is amending things on the back end. This is so much easier to program against. And this kind of leads into what I think is going to start happening. I think games are, in fact, probably the most sophisticated digital property around live ops. It's what they call it, live operations, right? Mm-hmm. They have teams, calendars, reproducible events, and they're incredibly scientific around how they run these events to make games feel alive consistently. Mm-hmm. And I think music is going to become a part of live operations. I think having artist drops, and that's even going to extend out into the blockchain NFT space. I think having artist exclusives, listening parties, reproducible infrastructure so that you can have that section of people's lives, which is very emotional and very engaging for them, be something that is portable and fun and meaningful and unique inside of the games they play.
Well, and one thing that we talked about on that panel too is that, during COVID, you had solely a virtual event because you quite literally could not host a live event with a crowd, right? But I can tell you firsthand knowledge, these artists want to play in front of crowds. Like, to be on that XR stage and to be facing just a bunch of techs and cameras, Justin Bieber isn't having the best time doing that versus when he could be in front of tens of thousands of fans in an arena, right? And so what I think is coming, and I'm really interested in your perspective here, is you have your live event, the tens of the thousands of fans in the stadium, but then you're augmenting that with in-game or in Metaverse virtual concert that can then reach millions of people who are not there physically. Agree, disagree, different perspective?
Same page. I'm on the same page. And I think it's just looking at the other side of the coin. Looking at it from an artist perspective, what is meaningful from them, insofar as I can derive, right, is increasing the volume of streams against your songs. Your existing catalog that you have, as well as the new hits that are trickling out. I don't see... Some artists still release full albums. Others trickle out hits into the DSP and then work through marketing channels, social channels to push and drive those individual songs up the charts. I actually see from the recorded music industry side that they are starting to look at gaming and the metaverse as a part of their media plans. And it makes sense, right? Your people got incredibly enthusiastic about pushing content, pushing themselves, and pushing their media, pushing their artistic creations through social media because they can cluster a meaningful amount of engaged audience there. You can even quantify exactly how much that audience is because on any given platform, there's a counter that tells you how many people you're reading, and there's tools that you can view that show you how many people your posts reach. So you can measure these things and improve these metrics over time. Games are no different. If you are releasing a song and you're releasing it into a game that has 10 million monthly active users, sure, there's probably a sliver, a Venn diagram of crossover audience that you'd be hitting anyway. But I'm willing to bet that there's an enormous amount of audience that are new to what you're releasing.
I guarantee you that Travis Scott earned far more young fans than pre-Fortnite, right? And everybody's referring to his latest hit as the Fortnite song, which I don't know how he feels about that, but I'm pretty sure he loves the streams and the downloads and the new fans. I will say, it's a great point that not only are you reaching millions more people with an event, but you also have that data opportunity. Typically, live events are a black hole from a data perspective. Now, that's improving with, some vendors, right, who are providing solutions to that. But yeah, if you're in the game, you're in the metaverse, you have to log on digitally. There's a lot more data for you to retarget and turn that person into not just a one-time listener, but a lifelong fan.
That's an excellent point, because from a in-game perspective, you can show exactly the number of streams of your songs, the exact number of total and concurrent people and unique people who heard it. And if there's a purchasable element against it, like a download DLC element, you can show exactly how many people purchased it. And then using a pretty light layer of data science, you should be able to look at things like the Billboard charts using the timestamp of the event, sort the signal from the noise, and see exactly how far it moved you up in the streaming charts. And that is really compelling. Yeah. I think to anyone who is interested in driving streams, driving a particular digital KPI.
Well, help me understand something else too, because we're talking a lot about the metaverse and in-game. What are some of the differences, pros and cons, things to consider, whether you're in a game like Fortnite or Roblox, or whether you're on a metaverse platform?
Oh gosh, great question. And it's tough because, you can ask a lot of game makers and they'll say that metaverse has been around for a while. It's an MMO essentially.
Yeah.
Gosh, you ask folks like Linden Labs, who are the pioneers of this. I mean, they made Second Life, 20 years ago,
right?
And it's still thriving. So this concept is not new. It's just become popularized, and the adoption is wide, and it's in the public now. We all know about it. There's articles. The latest GQ episode, magazine, the issue is about this.
I just think it's cool to say metaverse, and I feel very innovative and cool when I say it. So if I said that versus Second Life, then I'm feeling a little outdated. I'm feeling like I'm yesterday's news.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of people who are in the Web3 space who are hopping on board this metaverse train. There's the breadiverse, there's the cheeseaverse.
Oh, wow. You lost me at cheeseaverse, my
friend. It's about to, this is the Wild West, man. It's the Wild West. But yeah, I think the differences between the two are, one, there may not be a lot of differences between the two. There are games that exist inside the metaverse. This is how I personally view it.
Okay.
Metaverse tends to be an engine, a game, essentially an engine, right? Like Unity or Unreal.
Yep.
And as opposed to having to be a very skilled coder to build on top of it, it is created as such that it opens up the creator audience to be much, much broader. So to be able to be a creator on Roblox, there are far less barriers to entry than being a creator on top of, say, Unity, where you actually need a background in coding or an enormous amount of patience and a lot of YouTube tutorials to be able to make something meaningful. And within that, I think we're starting to see some different stuff emerge where on the game side, I can at least say for us, the way that people are leveraging the music in terms of radio and emotes, it is wildly different use case to use case. If you just give game makers tools, they will do things with those tools that you never imagined in a great way. I mean that in an absolutely great way. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that with music. Within the metaverse environments, let's take some of the dominant environments and ones that are emerging. So in terms of dominant ones, let's look at Roblox as being an example of one of those. And in terms of emerging, let's look at Sandbox as being an example of one of those. What is happening on both of them is very similar. So in Roblox, but with slight differences. Roblox, what I'm seeing is these creators make big, robust game experiences. I think Sega released a Sonic Land that is incredibly robust. It is just a big, beautiful Sonic world that sits inside of the game. And this is amazing. This is an amazing thing. That shows that it's literally a game engine. Inversely, let's look at Sandbox, where people are buying up land, and depending on who purchases that land, the space around it becomes more valuable. And if you want to try to buy next to Snoop Dogg's plot of land, you pay a 4x premium. So what that's done is created that parcel of virtual land. It has now become the Hollywood Hills, essentially.
Right.
And I'm seeing brands.
Thanks, Snoop Dogg.
I know. Hey, man, whoever got in there early, I'm sure they're pretty happy.
That's true. Good point.
But in a game, it's an incredibly curated experience, right? You're going there typically for a single thing, and there are all these tutorials that walk you through it. And the metaverse, it can be a little different. There's so much content to sort through. And just for instance, look at how Sandbox is laid out. There is no shopping district. There is no music row like Nashville.
There probably will be close to Snoop Dogg's house.
Potentially, but it's sort of a first come, first serve basis, and it's growing organically like a real city. And I think that's a part of their ethos, which is very interesting.
Yeah, so I have two things that come to mind, and we'll tackle the one closer to your point first, which is captive audience, or audience that is essentially already there. So if I'm an artist, why I'm interested in doing an event in Fortnite or Roblox or something like that is because you have millions of players, millions of users who are already there. And so I am going to the audience, right? Like most of the people who are in Fortnite for Travis Scott would have been playing Fortnite anyway, right? Now, did they drive more because this thing is happening and they really marketed it? Of course. But the difference in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong in my thinking here, but in the metaverse is saying, okay, like I don't have to worry about the complexities of or politics or what have you of a specific game. I'm going to this kind of, I don't know if white label is the right term, but more not unbiased. What am I looking for here? A platform that is not based on a game, right? But now I have to pull people to me. And so and then the other thing that I think that would be more of an argument for the metaverse, and tell me if I'm wrong once again here, but is IP issues. Is my life more simple if I'm doing metaverse platform versus in-game from an IP perspective? Because we know very well, especially in the esports space, these publishers own the IP of that game. Do I now have a more complicated circumstance of owning my content if I'm doing something in a game versus if I'm just doing it on a more white label type of a platform?
That's a great question. I think I'll address the first half and then the second half around what I think around the IP rights. The first half is, I think both of them have their different strengths in terms of being able to use branded IP. The metaverse, you're right. Like you have the ability to kind of create from scratch. Look at like the Snoop Dogg universe, or in fact, some of the labels themselves are just going in there and getting land and creating experiences around it. Now, do you have to create something that is evergreen and programmable? Yes. I think you need game mechanics that when there is no programming are still meaningful and fun to play. And then you need to create a real cadence of cool things for people to go in there and like any venue, right? Like any concert venue, be able to go in and see on a regular basis. Inside of a game, the strength, or a more traditional style game, is narrative. So you could potentially, because a lot of these games have their own worlds and narrative built out, there's opportunity to weave the artist, the activation, the music into a pre-built narrative, which is kind of cool.
There's also, I would say, as I'm being the pessimist to your optimist here, I would also say there's also the requirement, right? So from an artist perspective, I might say, I don't want to be a Fortnite character. I don't want to be part of that concept. I don't want to look like the avatars in Roblox, right? I have this very different concept that is my artistic expression. And so that could be a little bit pros and cons. Would you agree, or are you thinking about that a little differently?
No, you're absolutely right. You have two different creative visions. You have somebody, both sides are protective around the creative IP and the brand that they've built. And now you have to meaningfully find a way to mesh those together. I think that's where the fun can be, but also absolutely, there's challenges involved in that, right? Because sometimes the styles mesh and sometimes they don't. And I think that's really where the art comes into matchmaking, making sure that you find an artist who really does fit the ethos, the attitude, not just the demographic, like is a real true puzzle piece fit with the game and the environment. Yeah. On the IP licensing side, that is a little bit more challenging. Even the metaverses have very similar issues where the music, the IP, all of that has to be cleared. And although there could be more opportunities for the creators who build on those platforms to generate revenue from them, similar IP issues exist. You still have to be very, very cognizant of the IP owners.
Okay. Well, one thing I want to touch on here, we've got about 20 minutes and I could talk to you forever. I could already tell. So I know it's easy to go along here. One of the feedback pieces I heard from some of the people who watched our two panels, we did kind of the cultural dynamics, do's, don'ts, examples, and then we had a second one, which was this is how you technically do it, which was with our friend Berto Mora of All of It Now, who has a partnership with PRG. So I want to talk a little bit about how do we actually do this so that people listening aren't just hearing, oh, now I know about this, but now I just have more questions. So walk me through, and let's just do two different targets, if you will. So let's start with if I'm on the artist side. If I'm on the artist side and I want my recorded music, which is the proper term we learned today, in a game or in Metaverse, whatever, do I call you? Do I do something else? How am I making that happen?
Good question, because that path is a little different. There are ways for independent artists to get intermeshed with games, but it tends to be a little bit of a longer road, and it tends to be more direct personal connections that can lead you to that. Okay. I don't want to discourage independent artists from doing this because I do think it's possible, but I think that is more reliant on your individual network inside of the gaming space. However, through the existing, label and publishing structures, all of them have some independent arm against them. Yeah. And what I would say is it will be easier from a promotional, from an access perspective, and from an IP rights perspective to go through the existing, let's say, label infrastructure to go into games.
So it sounds like you're saying talk to your label and tell them your interest in getting into game, and then let them utilize their networks and their connections to then help you with that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct. Yes, because those labels are tied into a lot of different entities, and even independent labels. It can be folks like us, like Stinger, on the games and the Metaverse side. It can be companies like Pelotons of the world. And you can get your music into these live elements in the fitness category, which is absolutely exploding right now. Oh,
yeah. Good point. Yeah.
This is huge. So I would say be open to these live digital experiences, but don't necessarily have a limited view of what that is. Work with your labels. And if they are an independent label, they still likely have access and infrastructure in there. And they can help connect you to the right folks to get you inside of games, but also they can ensure that your rights and the publishing against your music is cleared for those particular platforms, because often artists don't have their rights exclusively on, whether that's on the label side or on the publishing side. They go through an intermediary, and there's reasons they do this, right? They want the PR muscle. They want the MGs that are offered. There are positive things around this. But it is so much easier to go through the existing infrastructure and then have them reach out to folks like a Stinger or like a Peloton or like, there's a bunch of, Steezy is a great example of this too. And a lot of these companies as well have relationships with these metaverses. Look at Warner's relationship with Sandbox right now, and look at some of the larger labels' relationship with some of the other dominant metaverses that are out there. I think that's the way to go, because then you're really, you're talking to the right people, and your music's going to be clear on those platforms.
Awesome. So when we go to the other side of it, if I am a video game publisher, or maybe I'm a metaverse platform, and you can tell me if these are separate or if they can be spoken as the same entity, what are my action steps? I know that's your target market. So am I calling you? Am I taking different steps than that?
Shameless plug. Yeah, please call us. I mean, and we treat the metaverse and games as one and the same, to be honest. For us, it's no different from a licensing perspective. And we can help find ways to get not only the music in there, but also really interesting personalized things like music emotes, and get artist activations. We're actually looking at creating and launching a platform that will specifically allow game devs to come, apply, and if they're accepted, we'll go out there and find these artist activations and do it for them, and even subsidize it potentially, because our mission is to see more music out into gaming in the metaverse. Now, if there are very specific use cases that you have that fall outside of an in-game use, I'm thinking of something like a trailer inside of a video game. You have this beautiful trailer that you've created for your MMO, and you want to overlay a piece of music on it. That requires a very specific right. That is a sync license. In that instance...
what kind of license was that?
A sync license, where you're syncing the music specifically and forever to this visual work. It's the exact same type of license that exists for film when you're using recorded music inside of a movie. That requires reaching out directly to the labels and publishers. And there are avenues for this. The only thing I would say is that those queues can be a little bit long. So be very deliberate about what you want, be incredibly descriptive about what you want, and try to do your homework and research on who owns the label rights to it and who owns the publishing rights to it, so that you're not spinning wheels and you know exactly which direction, which entities you need to reach out to get this particular song you want into your game. There's also contractors who can do this, like law firms that can specialize in this for you as well.
Got it. So experience is the best teacher. You have a lot of experience. Not many people have experience in this space. So what are some of the missteps that you see people making, or what are some of the good things, the do's that we want people to be able to replicate that you've experienced throughout this?
Good question. I would say the biggest misstep is just trying to use any music you want and seeing what happens. This is
you mean somebody owns that and will sue you to hell and back?
Well, it's tough. I mean, I see a lot of game makers, and let's just say people making general applications, right?
Sure.
And they're like, you know what? I'm going to do this artist a favor and get a snippet of their music and use it over my content.
Hey, if you want to do me a favor, pay me. Right?
Yeah, exactly. What great promotion for them.
Cash in hand is the greatest favor.
Exactly. That's like going to your friend who's an artist and be like, you know what? I'm going to do you a solid. You can play my party. Well, doesn't that sound awesome? I'm going to give you the right.
All the right people will see it.
All the right people are going to be there.
Yeah.
Don't you want to get in on this? Like, man, you got to pay artists. Come on. Like, they got to earn a living. And what you're doing in that scenario is, one, to me, you're just openly saying, I'm not going to pay this artist for the thing they've created.
I think it's called theft, right? Is that the technical term? Yeah. We learned a second term today. Recorded music.
The technical term.
Theft. We're learning all sorts of things. Yeah.
And you are going to upset people with that. And they are not good people to upset. I would not. Like, one of the reasons as an artist you sign with a label to publishers, they are there to be the muscle, and they are there to protect you. And if they find that somebody is just using something illegally, they're going to be really upset with you. And that is regardless of how big you are. If you are really small, if you are really big, it is somebody's job to find these things and be upset about it. And yeah, exactly. You don't want that anger thrown your way. It's no good. So even if it's hard, do it right. Do it right the first time, because it will avoid headaches and it'll damage relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There are really big social platforms right now that have damaged these relationships across the recorded music industry. And there are multi-year consequences to this. Like, do it right from the outset. Absolutely. And you will save headaches in the long run. And there are ways to shortcut it. I mean, hey man, we're happy to help you shortcut it if that's what you need. And there's even other services out there that can help you shortcut it. I think if you are out of the gaming sector and you're like a new application, look at Adapter. Adapter says, hey, startup, I know you don't have a lot of money to go out and get this music. We'll help you get it for a period of time in a way that you can afford. There are people out there who can help you do this, but don't just try to go for it. That's like just casually robbing a bank. Don't do that.
Thank you for helping our audience avoid a lot of headaches there. What are some of the things that you've seen done well? As not a lot of people have done this for a very long time. So what are some things that we can benchmark?
The things that have been done well in the space, I would say building out these really interesting, persistent experiences. Who's a company who does it incredibly well? Look at NBA 2K. They are treating music like live ops. They have artist activations that are coming in on a regular basis. They have new music that's incorporated, and this is difficult because they're doing this in the old-fashioned way. They're having new music coming in on a very regular basis. Yeah. And they are using that to drive the narrative of the game and give players new, fun experiences every time they come in. That is a company who's knocking it out of the park with this. And I think they're seeing monetary dividends as a result of this strategy. Was it easy to set up? No. But are they killing it in this regard? Absolutely. And I think getting a regular cadence, not only getting the infrastructure in place, but getting a regular cadence against that's meaningful is good. Look at the Fortnite concert series. Exactly what we were talking about earlier. Another fantastic example where the infrastructure was put in place and now you're just programming and making cool experiences around it.
I agree. Let's talk. Lastly, one more thing is just recognizing that this is a mutually beneficial situation between publishers / Metaverse and music. Right? There's a push-pull here. It doesn't just benefit one side, but it's benefiting both. Talk a little bit about how that dynamic is mutually beneficial.
Oh, that's a great point. Going back to that Travis Scott example, there are articles about what happened to Travis on the Billboard charts after that concert. It is quantifiable that his streams went up and he got new audience. And it was amazing for the game. It was all over Games Press. It was phenomenal. How often do you get 12.5 million concurrents? It's insane. That's sort of overwhelming, actually. So I think both sides are very open to this relationship. Now, I can tell you, because we are getting artists through labels approaching us to do activations inside of games, actively excited about it. We are getting games who, I think the biggest hurdle for games is just the idea that you can do this. It was sort of impossible. It was very difficult. It was very expensive. It's not that way anymore. It can be done. It can actually be done. And I think as games start to become more comfortable with this, there is a lot of opportunity around doing these mutually beneficial, co-branded, really fun releases inside of the games that are something new, that are something unique. And from a games perspective, look at how many parts of the LTV chain we drive with this. If you have regular programming over a series, we're doing an activation with the game, and we're going to drop an album exclusively inside of this game in small drops over 6 months. So now, if you're fans of that music and fans of this game, you have a material reason to come back for 6 months. So that's the lifetime part of LTV, right? And if you're pairing that with really interesting things like emotes or even merch, even like a piece of virtual merchandise around that event, that's the V portion of value. You're driving ARPU, and you're driving revenue against these initiatives. So I think there's, if you're creative, a lot of different ways you can leverage this. And also for games that are really mature, that have been out for a while, and they've iterated all left and right. And they're tapped out on the IP front, the in-app purchase front, and they're tapped out on the advertising front. There are new ways, like music, to be able to promote the game and to help monetize the game for your audience in a way that they like, in a way that's creative and exciting for them. So I think both sides are going to see a lot of benefit from this. And my hope is that more and more and more of these activations, they just become normal. It's not so much unique and new anymore. It's just expectation that these start to happen in game.
And technical execution, right? It's just, people, correct. I think one of the best things that happened during COVID was the comfort of these digital activations. Is typically agencies, brands don't want to be innovative because it's risky, right? If I put a bunch of dollars towards something that is unproven and it doesn't prove out to be beneficial, I could lose my job, right? Correct. And so my agency friends will tell you all day and all night, they pitch to these brands, let's do this thing, this is cool, this new technology. And they're like, no, let's do the same thing we did last time, because there's a reliable ROI around that, right? Well, during COVID, when you couldn't do these traditional marketing activities, people were pushed into digital. Some jumped in just to learn. Some jumped in saying, let's be first movers, right? Some held their dollars. And if you held your dollars, you're seeing the case studies from your competitors who are now a step ahead. And so it's a tremendously exciting time how people become so much more comfortable. Technology has evolved, but now with live events coming back into the fold, you now have both that are more powerful together than apart.
I totally agree. I think brands are going to hop on board this. They already are. They already are, particularly in the metaverse. And they're going to do some really exciting stuff there, with some expertise out of folks like you mentioned SLGs of the world. And I think games as brands themselves are really going to jump on this as well. It's an enormous amount of opportunity. And pairing the two together, that's the thing. They're not mutually exclusive. They were forced to be for a period of time. They're not mutually exclusive. We have artists who we've talked to and have reached out to us who are launching clothing brands, limited run clothing brands, right? Yeah. And what they want is to pair a digital asset inside of a game with that. And that's really interesting because you have access to all this audience on the game side. You're delivering a really cool experience to them that's tied to something physical, which is unique. On the physical audience side, now you're driving people into the game as well and getting this thing that adds a lot more value to the physical item that you just purchased. I think particularly with emotes and particularly with fashion, there's a lot that can be done in this space. Yeah,
that is absolutely my favorite tactic currently, is to enable digital goods inside of a game paired with physical goods so that your digital and your physical identities can mesh and you can represent yourself both in-game and IRL. And I just love it when brands do. Nike's doing a lot in that space, a lot of the other innovators. So look out for it. It's coming. Alex, before I let you go here, what are ways that people can get in touch with Stinger and you in the ways that you would like them to? On our website, stinger.com, we have a field where if you're a video game and you're interested in getting music, an artist activation, and anything that we mentioned today, if you're interested in that, getting that in your game,
go to the site, fill it out, hit us. Otherwise, we can always be reached. All of us are on the LinkedIns and on the socials. But we're excited. We're starting to do a real hard ramp up of this. And what I'm saying now confidently is that it's going to appear fun and new in Q4 and Q1 of next year. And by the end of 2023, it's going to start to become expectation in terms of having these great experiences inside of games, both from the artist side and from the gamer side, from the audience side. So I'm really excited over the next couple of years.
And what is your website so the audience can get in touch?
Sure. www.stinger.com. STYNGR. That's us. STYNGR.com.
Perfect. So just a shout out to the publishers, to the artists, to the labels. Like you heard Alex say, if you're not doing this now, expectation is coming soon. So get your feet wet, learn, be comfortable. So then when your boss says, hey, where's that Metaverse plan? You're ready. You're like, hey, man, I know, Alex. We're ready to go. So thank you so much, Alex, for joining me. I've learned so much through our conversations, both on stage and now on the podcast. And I really think this is really going to be a valuable asset to our audience. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all you're doing in this space.
Thank you so much, John. I love talking with you. Thanks for having me on. It was great.
All right. We'll do it again soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the DLC Drop Podcast. This podcast is part of the Esports Futuri Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave us a review.